A college student goes missing after a party.
I said, just be very careful out there. And she messaged back, and that was the last message I got from her.
In the morning, I'm texting all her friends, and everyone's like, I haven't heard from her since last night.
Maybe she got hurt, something medical happened, or she might have been arrested.
Loved ones tell police her boyfriend might be to blame.
The relationship was described as on again, off again.
When you're interviewing somebody, you're looking for clues to whether or not they may be telling you the truth.
I said that even if she's dead, I just need to know where she's at.
But an unexpected confession takes the case in another direction, revealing a killer and a cover-up that leaves everyone horrified.
They thought that if they got some pliers, they can return to the body and remove her teeth.
I feel like she is just a dangerous person.
Oh, they're telling me accessory.
They're gonna like you. I caught them in lie.
Jealousy, rage, betrayal. I think all those factors probably came into effect.
October 30th, 2021. It's the night before Halloween in Fairfield, California, a small town just north of San Francisco, and local police are responding to the usual calls that come in during the holiday.
I've worked at several patrol details on Halloween. We have party calls, we have people lighting off fireworks, sometimes gunfire. It's one of those things where you're out in the community patrolling to make sure everyone's safe.
But tonight, Officer Christopher Grimm receives a different assignment.
It was about 8:40 in the evening. I got a call from dispatch about a missing person. The reporting party, Sarah, had called about her friend Leilani.
She did my makeup that night. We got dressed together. We took pictures together. I was in a skeleton dress and she was a SWAT. We went to this first kind of kickback party. It was kind of a last minute thing that she mentioned that Juan was gonna meet up with us. It was the first time that I really met Juan.
Sarah explains that Juan is 19-year-old Leilani's ex from a year ago, but they recently reconnected.
She really did like him. She kind of tried to not show that she did as much as she did, but I could tell that she did.
They stayed at that party until around 2 a.m. when Leilani decided to call it a night.
Leilani had told me that, well, I'm gonna go to Juan's house. It's in Fairfield, which is 40 minutes away from my house at that point. Her car was at my house, her stuff was at my house, so, she was gonna make sure that she gets dropped off in the morning.
But when Sarah woke up around 9 a.m., Leilani still had not returned to the apartment.
I woke up and I had a missed call from her. Tried calling back, no one answered. I looked at the location and Leilani's location was on the freeway. So in my head, I was like, okay, she's on her way. I'm not gonna worry. I remember checking her location again because it's okay, now it's 30 minutes, you should be close. And at this point, I'm noticing that it's not anywhere close to Sacramento. I'm texting all her friends saying, can you get a hold of her? Can you call her? And everyone's like, no, I haven't heard from her since last night. I didn't have Leilani's family's numbers or anything at this point. We only knew each other for a year or two. So I decided to call the cops.
We tried to get a hold of Leilani via telephone, no results. Leilani's phone's off, it's not GPS pinging.
Once Leilani's phone was off is when things started not making sense. Something for sure happened to her.
Sarah doesn't have Juan's last name or address, so Officer Grimm contacts area hospitals to see if any have treated Leilani in the past 12 hours.
Maybe she got hurt, maybe something medical happened, or she might have been arrested. So I'm like, okay, let's start checking all these boxes. Then Leilani's parents call me. Now I'm really concerned. They haven't got a hold of their daughter. They don't know where she's at.
About 3, 4 o'clock, I still had not heard from Leilani and started reaching out to her friends. And sure enough, Sarah reached back out and said, I've been trying to locate you guys. We don't know where she is. She's missing. She told me that she had already called the police and made a missing persons report.
Violet recounts her final conversation with Leilani for investigators.
She told me that she was going to go to Sarah's house, and I remember messaging her back, and I said, just be very careful out there. And she messaged back, of course I'll be okay. Of course I'll be safe. And that was the last message I got from her.
Her pattern of life went dead at 10 o'clock in the morning. So she has no contact. No outgoing phone calls on her phone. Her phone's off. No bank transactions on her debit cards. So now foul play is starting to come in.
Her parents came to the investigations bureau and they said, I don't know what we can do to help, but we want to find our daughter.
So part of my investigation was to figure out a little bit of background on Leilani.
Leilani Beecham was born June 12, 2002, in Long Beach, California. She was the oldest of 3 children.
Ever since Leilani was tiny, we called her Tiny but Mighty because she was a small girl with a very big personality.
I came into their life when she was 4. She always helped the underdog. She always made it a point to take care of people that she thought were less fortunate.
Growing up, Leilani's interests were shaped by her loved ones.
Leilani fell in love with cars ever since she was really tiny, and it was definitely probably stemmed from her brother, Anthony.
Lonnie would look over and see us working on cars all the time. Sometimes she would work on cars with us. So she already just naturally knew quite a bit about cars.
In the town center, they would have an event with car shows. So we would always go to the car shows and the kids would take pictures.
She was a super fun big sister. Me and her always used to go get Jamba Juice and have movie nights. And she always used to do my makeup and stuff like that, very girly stuff.
After high school, Leilani went to college in San Jose. Instead of cars or makeup, she decided to pursue a career in real estate like her parents.
Onyx is a broker as well, too, so I think that's where she was, getting that drive from. And then Violet's a real estate agent, so it was, just in the family.
Leilani made me proud pretty much in anything that she did.
But Leilani didn't give up car culture completely. One of her favorite pastimes was attending car sideshows.
It's basically a flash mob gathering of people and vehicles where stunts are performed.
Cars drift, slide, do donuts. It's not real race cars, but Mustangs, CTSVs, And it was another family being in that scene.
Me and Leilani were going to these parties and meeting new people and just having fun, enjoying our life.
And with Halloween season approaching, Leilani and her friends were making big plans.
She liked the whole idea of doing her hair crazy, doing her makeup fun, and just being something that she's not for a day.
She was going to drive down from San Jose so that we would be able to have a sleepover together before the night that we were going to go out. We were just super excited.
But now, Leilani has vanished, and Bay Area police are attempting to locate her on-again, off-again boyfriend who took her home that night.
We're looking for a guy named Juan. I get a phone call from Sarah later on about 10:30. So this is about roughly 2 hours after she initially had contacted the Fairfield Police Department to report Leilani missing. Sarah gives me Juan's address.
I asked, her friends, if anyone knew his house's address. I gave it to the police. I gave her the description of what she looked like, what she was wearing last, like just things like that. The only things that I could think to do to help anything.
I think I was more in shock than anything. I really started to panic.
Leilani has no pattern of life from the early morning hours on the day before. I think that we should probably spin up investigations to figure out what's going on. We can't let this slip through the cracks.
Coming up, suspicions against Juan grow.
I do remember him being very fidgety and almost had a scared look on his face.
And a guilty conscience reveals a brutal crime.
She said something about, "This is your fault," looked at him and then shot.
It's been almost 24 hours since 19-year-old Leilani Beacham left a Halloween party and vanished. Thankfully, investigators have their first lead, the address of her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Juan.
I get the phone call from Sarah advising Juan's address is on the east side of town near Travis Air Force Base. I was able to get Juan's name by looking at that address. So with that information, my partner and I go to that address to see what's going on.
As they travel, they run a background check and learn that Juan is a 20-year-old enlisted airman.
We get there, no lights on, no cars in the driveway, no one's coming to the door. I'm like, okay, well, obviously no one's home. My partner and I decide to walk to the backyard of the residence. All the curtains on the outside exterior windows are open, so you can kind of look inside to see the kitchen, the living room. I don't see any broken glass. I don't see any bodies laying down on the ground, on the floor of the residence. Nothing to say, hey, look, something bad had happened inside. So I had our dispatch center contact security forces to get hold of his Juan's first sergeant to figure out where exactly he is.
When detectives hear back the following morning, they're advised Juan is not currently on base and hasn't been seen for several days. They're directed to Juan's friend, another airman named Damien Ponders.
Juan and Damien are best friends. They're very close. They met through the Air Force and hung out a lot.
Juan actually has Damien's name tattooed on him. That's how close they were.
Detectives consider if Damien is one of the friends Juan brought to the party the night Leilani disappeared.
Detective Chapman and I had gone in to interview Damien Ponders and try to learn what happened to Leilani.
Damien was in his dorm at the time, and I asked him the preliminary questions that I do in most missing persons cases, and he said he didn't know where she was at.
Damien confirms he was at the party with Juan, but says Leilani didn't leave with them.
Damien tells me that he left the party with Juan and goes back to the house in Fairfield. Juan wakes him up and he goes to work. That's essentially the gist of his statement.
That directly contradicts what Leilani's friend Sarah told investigators.
When you're interviewing somebody, you're looking for a lot of different clues to whether or not they may be telling you the truth. But I do remember him being very fidgety when being questioned and almost had a scared look on his face.
I said that even if she's dead, I just need to know where she's at. And then I got a reaction from Damien that was very Hollywood, if you will, a big gulp. And I could see his palms dripping sweat, and that was the first red flag in the case. I knew something was wrong. But I can't force anyone to say anything.
Detectives release Damien and leave him on the base for the time being. But on their way out, they get an unexpected call.
Juan agreed, through his commanding officer, to come speak with me at Travis Air Force Base.
Juan's story is essentially the same as his friend Damien's.
It was that he did see Leilani in Sacramento, but never came home with her. But during his interview, I was made aware that Damien came down from his dorm and wanted to speak with me again. So I leave Juan in the interview room, and I speak with Damien. He's somehow more nervous, and he wants to tell me something.
To investigators' surprise, Damien says he wants to change his statement. He now confesses that Leilani did come home with him and Juan after the Halloween party.
Damien, being heavily intoxicated, ended up being tucked in, for lack of a better description, on the downstairs couch, and Juan and Leilani went upstairs to Juan's room where they slept. That morning, Damien did not wake up to any of the alarms set by Juan, so their supervisor calls Juan. Juan rushes downstairs, wakes Damien up. Damien goes onto base and goes to work.
Damien says as far as he knew, Leilani was still there when he left. A few hours later, he got a call from Juan with a strange request.
He was asked to go to the store and buy specific cleaning supplies to include bleach, towels, and things of that nature.
Damien says he did as Juan asked, and when he got to the house, he found out what the supplies were for.
Damien was really there to help cover up Leilani's murder.
According to Airman Damien Ponders, 19-year-old Leilani Beecham isn't missing, she's dead. And he says he agreed to help his best friend, Juan Peralta, clean up the evidence.
Damien says he's afraid, but he, is worried for Juan, and so he agrees to help.
He's, on one hand, trying to help out his best friend, but on the other hand, concealing a murder.
Juan is actually in a neighboring interview room, and he can hear part of what Damien is saying.
I think Juan put two and two together, and he said something to the effect of, well, since you know everything, I'll tell you what happened.
Juan confirms everything Damien told investigators, but insists he isn't the one who killed Leilani. Instead, he blames the murder on his jealous ex-girlfriend, a 21-year-old woman named Jessica Quintanilla.
The relationship between Jessica Quintanilla and Juan Peralta was described as volatile and on again, off again.
A background check reveals Jessica Quintanilla was born October 2000 in Pittsburgh, California.
Jessica had a lot of energy all the time, like a lot of energy. She was always running, playing. She's always been a happy person. She's always had a lot of ideas. She's a very smart girl.
Jessica had two children at an early age, both before she was 21. She was going through a divorce at the time.
She had 2 jobs as a dental assistant and also as a caregiver at a senior home.
Juan says he and Jessica have had an on and off relationship for about a month. During one of their breaks, he'd rekindled things with Leilani.
Leading up to the night of Friday, October 29th of Halloween weekend 2021, Juan and Jessica had broken up again, perhaps the final time this time.
So Juan meets up with Leilani, and they ultimately come back to his home in Fairfield, where they go to sleep. The next morning, Jessica had come over.
An argument occurs between the two of them, where Jessica's trying to pick up some of her property, and during that time is when Jessica finds out that Leilani's in the bed. Jessica said something to the effect of, "Oh, this bitch."
When jealousy gets involved, bad things happen.
Jessica basically left the room, went downstairs to her car, came back, now had a firearm.
Jessica said something about, "This is your fault," looked at him, and then shot Leilani.
After Jessica shot Leilani Beacham in the head, Juan is there kind of in shock and grappling with what just happened, and goes over to Leilani and can clearly see that she is deceased.
Juan says Jessica threatened him as well.
She says something to him along the lines of, according to him, basically, she kind of says, "You need to help me or else I will hurt you, Damien, your family, ruin your career."
According to Juan, he was too scared to cross Jessica or her family.
She had a brother, Marco Quintanilla, that had just been placed on parole.
He was a previously convicted felon, convicted of attempted murder in Contra Costa County some years before.
Juan took these all as threats, and because of that, he went along with helping Jessica.
Juan proceeds to tell us how they loaded Leilani's body into a car and drove it to basically down south, the Salinas area, and had dumped the body off of a hillside.
Juan tells investigators he called his friend Damien at Jessica's request.
At least from Jessica's perspective, Damien is a ride or die for Juan. They were going to need to go back to Juan's house to clean up the blood and other materials that were there that could incriminate them.
After they cleaned up the crime scene, they drove to the house where Jessica's brother Marco was staying.
Juan said Jessica got out of the car, Marco got in the car, having never met Juan before, and basically said, "If she goes down, you go down, and I have no problem going back to prison."
Juan told us that he had provided the shovels, some other items, and the firearm to Marco to dispose of.
They went to Home Depot to buy various items to include duct tape, lighter fluid, and pliers. Jessica thought that if they got some pliers, they can return to the body and remove Leilani Beacham's teeth and light her on fire, destroying all evidence that would lead back to who that body belonged to.
Juan says investigators found him before they got a chance to burn Leilani's body, and offers to take them to the spot where they left her.
He couldn't necessarily give us an address, so we put him in a patrol car, and he showed us where to go.
Coming up, investigators zero in on their suspect.
There's nothing telling us that they're gonna like you.
But can they prove she's the one who pulled the trigger?
The only people in the room other than Leilani were Juan and Jessica.
After confessing to his role in covering up the murder of Leilani Beacham, 20-year-old Juan Peralta leads detectives to the spot where they left the body.
Where her body was disposed of was in a secluded neighborhood, windy roads, less than desirable cell phone service, 30 yards or so off the road into a valley that was overgrown with brush. When he took us to Leilani, pointed her out.
While Leilani's body is taken to the medical examiner for autopsy, investigators notify her parents.
Without saying any words, they knew what we're about to say, which almost made it harder. They're waiting for us to say it so they can hear it.
In the beginning, I was just more worried about, did she suffer? Did she bleed out? Was she asking for help?
Seeing Leilani's parents hear the news that they lost their daughter naturally it brings up emotion. And that emotion essentially is a driving force to continue to do a good job.
With that extra motivation in mind, a forensics team heads to Juan's house, hoping to find any evidence he and Jessica Quintanilla may have missed while cleaning the crime scene.
For this particular scene, I did use Blue Star, which is a presumptive blood agent. When Blue Star reacts with the blood, it creates like a blue, almost like fluorescent color. And so I found areas in the bedroom as well as the garage that glowed. We also located a projectile strike in one of the bedroom walls. And we were able to locate the bullet fragment.
It helps support Juan's statement and helps tell you if he's telling you the truth.
When investigators go to Jessica's house to question her, she's not there. But a few hours later, she's spotted in the neighborhood driving Juan's car.
It's Juan's prized possession. It's the car that he brings to the sideshows. They ultimately make a stop on the vehicle and find that Jessica Quintanilla is the sole driver.
Fairfield PD shows up to arrest her. When they get to that scene in Pittsburgh, after Jessica stopped, her brother Marco Quintanilla shows up in a car. And so Marco is also arrested at that point on parole violation. And they are both transported to Fairfield PD.
By the time detectives sit down with Jessica in an interrogation room, it's Halloween night.
I would say she was calm, but almost seemed annoyed that we burdened her by bringing her down here and we're asking her what she's thinking is stupid questions. She was playing the game of not knowing anything.
Okay. What do you know about their friendship, relationship, whatever?
I don't.
You don't?
I just know she's cool with a lot of people in the sideshow.
The questioning turns to her month-long relationship with Juan.
You said your guys' relationship's like...
It's really good, honestly. It's really good. It's just me.
Okay. Tell me about that a little bit.
I just have toxic traits. I tend to start arguments kind of overnight then.
Jessica, in her interview, told us that her and Juan were dating. It was a very short relationship, but that Juan lived with her and basically described themselves as being a happy couple.
Jessica contradicts everything Juan told them.
Juan ever cheated on you?
No.
No?
That I know of.
In her timeline of the weekend, Jessica told us that she had gone to, I think, several Halloween parties. Do you know where Juan was Friday?
With me.
With you?
Oh, no, actually he was at a party in Sac.
Okay.
And then he was with me.
Okay. What time did you meet up with him on Friday?
I was drunk as I had to check my phone.
Okay. Nighttime, daytime?
Nighttime. Yes, because I woke up to the man in my bed. He has a house key.
Are you aware of Juan's relationship with Leilani?
I don't think they have a relationship.
You don't think they have a relationship? Okay. Why would Juan tell me earlier that he has a relationship with Leilani?
I don't know.
At some point, Jessica asked if she can speak to her brother, which is not necessarily something we do often, but at this point, she's not giving us a statement. He's not really giving us too much, so we put them in the room together.
Aware they're being watched, Jessica and Marco try to keep their conversation discreet.
Marco and Jessica hug each other, and Jessica whispers to Marco something to the effect of, don't speak to them, they don't know and stuff of that nature.
Oh, they're telling me accessory because I took the shovel.
There's nothing, Tony. They're gonna like you. I caught them in a lie.
She's whispering, but you can hear it. She's saying, what did you tell them about the body? Which obviously begs the question, if you didn't know about the body, how would you ask that?
When detectives separate the pair, Marco says he's ready to talk.
Marco has something, hanging over his head, and that's parole. So he wants to tell the truth, and selfishly, he doesn't want to get in trouble for something he didn't do. Marco tells us that he actually meets Juan for the first time that morning, and Juan and Jessica tell him that we up.
I went home to her house to check up on her, and I seen the shovel. I took it. He asked me if I could take the Glock. I asked him, is it clean? He was like, yes, there's nothing, it's never been shot before. I didn't grab it. I told him I just put it in the back of the car. I don't know what it was for, whether it was for that or for other purposes.
We ask if there's any way we can get that firearm. So Marco calls his girlfriend and essentially coordinates her to bring it down to the police department so we can pick it up.
However, analysis indicates the gun Marco gave them is not the murder weapon.
The gun that was involved in the murder was never found. At this point, we have probable cause to believe that Jessica Quintanilla was involved in the murder of Leilani Beacham.
Jessica, Marco, and Juan are all placed under arrest.
The police told me that she was being accused of murdering Leilani, and I said, who is Leilani and who is Juan? We were all confused. We didn't know what to do, what was going on. We've never been in a situation like that.
But with everyone telling a different story, detectives need to find a way to get to the truth.
Someone was lying about what happened, trying to minimize what they had done.
After charging 3 suspects in connection to the murder of Leilani Beacham, investigators set about the task of determining which one of them pulled the trigger. Juan Peralta insists he had no reason to hurt Leilani, and her loved ones seem to agree with him.
From everyone I spoke with, Juan and Leilani's relationship was casual and nothing serious at all.
Leilani and Juan had known each other, I think, for about a year, and they had been kind of friends with benefits.
There was no expectations in their relationship. It was very friendly, and that leads me to believe further that Juan had no animosity against Leilani or any reason to murder Leilani Beacham.
Jessica, I feel like she is just a dangerous person.
Leilani's family says that after Jessica's arrest, they've been flooded with negative stories about her.
When it became public on the news of Leilani's murder, I had random people messaging me, and they had said various things about Jessica's behavior and how she was quite violent, and they weren't surprised that this had happened.
Social media posts reveal there was another incident involving Jessica and Leilani about a week before the murder took place.
Juan and Leilani attended a sideshow in the Sacramento area, and Jessica was there.
Jessica came up to the vehicle seeing Leilani in Juan's car and opened up the door, started antagonizing Leilani, and was like trying to fight her.
She was like, this girl freaked out on me. I didn't even know who she was. She was mad that I was with Juan.
Looking for further proof, detectives get a search warrant for Jessica's electronic devices.
Jessica Quintanilla had stated that she did not know that Leilani and Juan had had a prior sexual relationship. In the Instagram record, she stated very clearly that she was aware of that. She had spoken about that incident at the sideshow and spoke about it in a very derogatory way about Leilani, kind of mocking her and laughing at her. She did not like seeing Leilani in a car with Juan.
Also, our cell phone collects data to include location data. So we use things like that to prove or disprove statements Juan's given us the chronology of where they went and when they went places. Once we gathered the call detail records and had them analyzed, we're able to prove that the things that he was saying were true.
The GPS data on Jessica's phone indicates she went to the locations Juan mentioned, including the site where Leilani's body was found and the store where they bought supplies.
On the day of the murder, Jessica and Juan were seen on camera at Home Depot purchasing shovels and some other items.
But what I really tried to review the evidence for was how were they acting after this had transpired? And that when you see the nature of their behavior and attitude in those roughly 24 to 36 hours after Leilani Beacham was murdered, Juan appeared to be someone who was affected by what he had seen, and Jessica appeared to be incredibly unaffected.
We found that she even went to a party after murdering Leilani Beacham.
Despite the evidence against her, Jessica pleads not guilty. And without a murder weapon or direct evidence she pulled the trigger, prosecutors know a conviction is not guaranteed.
If one juror is not convinced that the defendant is guilty, it can result in a mistrial.
The only people in the room when Leilani was murdered, other than Leilani, were Juan and Jessica. So I did not think I was going to be able to prove, just based on physical evidence, who was the shooter.
On October 15th, 2024, 3 years after the murder of 19-year-old Leilani Beacham, Jessica Quintanilla and her brother Marco stand trial together.
Marco Quintanilla was charged with accessory after the fact to a murder, and he was also charged with felon being in possession of a firearm.
Damian Ponders and Juan Peralta were provided immunity in order to provide a statement in court as a witness.
Juan and Damian were not charged with any crimes related to Leilani's murder.
Juan and Damian did not get off scot-free. They were kicked out of the Air Force. They have been held accountable.
I remember the first time I walked into court and I saw them face to face. It was a very surreal feeling. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel mad. I felt very empty.
Over the course of 5 weeks, prosecutors present evidence and witness testimony that frames Jessica as a dangerously jealous woman with a history of violence.
Jealousy, rage, betrayal. I think all those factors probably came into effect when the incident happened.
I think Jessica snapped because she's someone who liked control. This is one time where she was not in control of who Juan was seeing. And in order for her to control that situation, she killed Leilani Beacham.
What I argued to the jury, and what I believe to be true from the evidence, is that Juan did not have a motive to hurt Leilani. Jessica did. Juan testified that Jessica and Marco threatened him to help cover up this murder.
On November 5th, Jessica takes the stand in her own defense. She changes her story, now claiming Leilani was killed by accident.
Jessica gave the impression that she and Juan had struggled over a firearm, and they must have been on the right side of the bed. And she grabbed his arm and then said the gun discharged or fired. And the bullet struck Leilani Beacham in the head, killing her. But the coroner testified that the bullet entered the left side of Leilani Beacham's head, killing her. So Jessica Quintanilla, then in that moment during the trial, was clearly lying.
No remorse on Jessica's part. None at all. That whole sense of arrogance through the whole trial was just sickening for the family.
On November 19th, the jury delivers its verdict.
Jessica Quintanilla was ultimately found guilty of the murder of Leilani Beacham and was sentenced to 25 years to life. Marco Quintanilla was found guilty as well and was given 4 years as an accessory after the fact.
You're not happy, you just feel thankful that you're able to bring some sense of justice to Leilani's family, who obviously can never get complete justice because Leilani is gone.
I don't think 25 years was enough because they took away my sister and it made the whole family grieve.
Losing Leilani made us all feel that we were also all buried with her. However, one of the things I keep saying out loud is, Lonnie, give me your strength, because she was so strong. And I do feel like somehow we're all getting a piece of that strength that is allowing us to move forward.
I just forever will always hold Leilani's, legacy, because I remember the good times I had with her and how much she affected me as a person.
We're setting up a foundation for Lonnie, so that's kind of where we stand now as a family. She won't be forgotten, and we will really work every day that we can to make sure that that remains the case.
The examination of domestic crimes reveals a profound and often unsettling paradox within the human experience, demonstrating how the very spaces designed for safety, nurturance, and unconditional love can sometimes become the stages for tragic betrayal. To comprehend the motives behind crimes committed within the family unit, one must look beyond simple material gain and delve into the complex psychological landscape of entitlement, generational instability, and the erosion of personal responsibility. In many such cases, including the tragic event that unfolded in the quiet community of Pasco, Washington, the underlying motive is not merely a dispute over a minor sum of money or a piece of property, but rather a deeper, systemic conflict between two opposing ways of living. On one side stands a lifestyle of order, generosity, and hard work, represented by a maternal figure who spent her life building stability. On the other side lies a pattern of dependency, chronic manipulation, and an intense resentment of the very boundaries that keep a family safe. When these two forces collide under one roof, the perpetrator often views the benefactor not as a protector, but as an obstacle to be bypassed or eliminated. This resentment is frequently fueled by a sense of entitlement, where the perpetrator believes they are owed the fruits of another person's labor, without having to put in the effort to earn it. When the benefactor finally attempts to establish boundaries, limit financial access, or hold the dependent party accountable, the fragile peace shatters, leading to a sudden and devastating escalation of conflict. These tragic occurrences happen with alarming frequency across various communities because of several systemic and psychological factors. Often, there is a cycle of generational instability that is difficult to break, where children raised in chaotic environments struggle to develop the coping mechanisms and emotional maturity required to handle life's challenges. When these individuals face financial hardships or relationship failures, they frequently revert to old habits of running away, lying, and exploiting the kindness of those who love them. Family members, driven by a deep sense of devotion and a desire to protect younger generations, particularly grandchildren, often open their homes and resources without realizing the danger they are bringing across their own thresholds. This desire to preserve family unity and shield children from the consequences of their parents' actions can inadvertently create an environment where manipulative behaviors thrive unchecked. The victim, out of love and a fear of losing contact with beloved grandchildren, may tolerate increasing levels of hostility and emotional abuse, keeping their concerns hidden from law enforcement and neighbors until the situation reaches a critical and irreversible point of danger. In unraveling these complex domestic cases, investigators must rely on a combination of physical evidence, technological forensics, and the acute observations of the surrounding community. In the pursuit of justice, the most critical clues often emerge from the tiny, overlooked details that expose the inconsistencies in a perpetrator's fabricated narrative. When a suspect claims to have acted in self-defense, investigators look for physical signs of a struggle, the distribution of items in the home, and the precise trajectory of any physical impacts. A clean, orderly house with undisturbed furniture immediately raises suspicions when a violent confrontation has been alleged. Furthermore, modern forensic science plays a pivotal role in reconstructing the final moments of a victim's life. The analysis of emergency calls, including background noises such as the distinct sound of a safety alarm or the quiet voices heard before a call is disconnected, provides an objective timeline that cannot be manipulated by the suspect. Additionally, the examination of physical documents found at the scene, such as financial folders or legal papers, can reveal the true motive of the crime, showing that the victim was actively documenting wrongdoing or attempting to secure their assets at the very moment they were targeted. The sophistication of such criminals is often characterized by a strange mixture of premeditation and profound foolishness. Perpetrators of domestic crimes frequently spend considerable time planning their actions, attempting to bypass security measures, alter legal documents, or even stage scenes to make a deliberate act appear as an accident or an act of self-defense. They may employ digital technology to spy on their victims, trying to capture security codes or private conversations, and they may attempt to manipulate other family members to act as accomplices or co-signers to their schemes. However, this perceived cleverness is almost always undermined by their own desperation and lack of foresight. In their eagerness to cover their tracks, they often make critical errors, such as leaving behind digital recordings of their planning, failing to account for the physical laws of nature during their staged incidents, or underestimating the intelligence of the neighbors and investigators who will inevitably look into the matter. There is a deep irony in the fact that the very technology and planning the criminal relies upon to execute their scheme frequently becomes the primary source of evidence used by the prosecution to secure a conviction. From these tragic events, communities can draw vital life lessons to prevent future occurrences and protect vulnerable individuals. One of the most important lessons is the necessity of recognizing toxic behavioral patterns early and establishing firm, unbreakable boundaries, even with close family members. While the desire to help a struggling child or relative is natural and admirable, it must not come at the expense of one's own safety and peace of mind. When behavior turns manipulative, coercive, or violent, it is critical to involve professional support systems, legal authorities, and community resources rather than trying to handle the situation privately. Furthermore, neighbors and friends must remain vigilant and look out for one another. Simple acts of neighborly connection, such as checking on a vulnerable resident, establishing informal check-in systems, or paying attention to unusual sounds and activities, can be life-saving. If a neighbor expresses fear or mentions that they feel unsafe in their own home, these concerns must be taken seriously, documented, and reported to the proper authorities, even if the victim themselves is hesitant to take action out of a sense of family loyalty. To accelerate the process of catching perpetrators and preventing tragedies from escalating, law enforcement agencies can utilize several advanced strategies and community policing techniques. Rapid response protocols to hang up emergency calls are essential, as every second counts when a domestic dispute turns violent. Officers must be trained to conduct thorough, inquisitive follow-ups, looking past initial explanations and seeking corroboration from independent witnesses, such as neighbors who may have heard or seen something unusual. Additionally, the immediate isolation and professional interviewing of vulnerable witnesses, such as young children who may have been present in the home, can quickly provide a clear, unvarnished perspective on the events, bypassing the fabricated stories of adult suspects. Police forces also benefit from strong relationships within the neighborhoods they serve, as trusted officers are more likely to receive critical tips and historical context from residents who observe changes in the household dynamics of their neighbors. By combining rapid tactical response with advanced digital forensics and compassionate community engagement, investigators can quickly pierce through complex cover-ups and bring the truth to light. In the beautiful and typically serene city of Pasco, Washington, known for its picturesque landscapes and safe, family-friendly reputation within the Tri-City area, the peace of the community was suddenly disrupted on the 3rd of March in the year 2011. On that day, emergency dispatchers received a strange and brief phone call that immediately raised alarms. When the call connected, the person on the other end was unable to communicate clearly, and the line was quickly severed. Following standard emergency protocol, the dispatcher immediately initiated a callback to the residence. When the call was reestablished, the distinct and piercing sound of a smoke detector could be heard ringing loudly in the background. The woman who answered the phone spoke in a distressed, hurried tone, claiming that there was no emergency and that the alarm had simply been triggered while she was attempting to replace the batteries. Despite her attempt to sound casual and dismiss the incident, her voice carried an undeniable undercurrent of tension that did not sit well with the emergency operator. Standard police procedure in the area dictated that any hang-up call or suspicious emergency contact required a physical follow-up by law enforcement officers to ensure the safety of the residents. It took approximately 14 minutes for the first responding officer to arrive at the modest home. As the officer approached the front door, he could hear the sound of dogs barking inside. When he knocked, the door was answered by 37-year-old Tasha Stewart, who reiterated the explanation that a simple mishap with a fire alarm had occurred and that everything was perfectly fine. However, the officer, bound by duty to verify that no crime had been committed, requested to enter the home to perform a safety check. Tasha asked the officer to wait on the porch for a moment while she secured the dogs in another room so they would not pose a threat to his safety. While the officer waited on the front porch, a neighbor from across the street, Ryan Rhodes, began to approach the property with a look of deep concern and urgency on his face. Ryan had been working on the engine of his truck in his own driveway when he heard two distinct, sharp sounds that he immediately recognized as gunshots emanating from the house across the street. He had observed the window of the home shake and pulse, with the physical impact of the noise, followed immediately by the persistent ringing of the smoke detectors inside. When he saw the police officer arrive and speak calmly with Tasha, Ryan felt compelled to step forward and correct the narrative, informing the officer that he had heard gunfire and was deeply worried about the safety of the other residents of the home. Ryan explained to the officer that an elderly woman and a young girl also lived in the house, urging the officer to take immediate action. Recognizing the gravity of the neighbor's testimony, the officer returned to the front door and knocked again. When Tasha opened the door, the officer did not hesitate, pushing his way into the entryway to secure the scene. Looking down the hallway, he immediately saw the motionless body of an elderly woman lying on the floor. The officer quickly called for emergency medical technicians and additional backup, realizing that this was far from a routine battery change or a minor household accident. The safety sweep of the home began immediately as officers worked to secure the area, ensure there were no other active threats, and find the young child who was still inside the residence. The deceased woman was identified as 58-year-old Judy Hebert, a beloved member of the local community, an avid master gardener, and a talented artist who had dedicated her life to creating beauty and stability for those around her. Judy was born on the 13th of June in the year 1952 in Amarillo, Texas, alongside her twin sister, Jody. While the twin sisters shared a deep bond, their lives eventually took very different paths. Judy was known for her reserved, gentle nature, her warm personality, and her deep desire for a stable, loving family. Her sister Jody, however, chose a more transient and chaotic lifestyle, eventually giving birth to a daughter named Tasha in the year 1972. Recognizing that her lifestyle prevented her from providing a suitable environment for her child, Jody turned to her twin sister Judy for help, asking her to raise Tasha as her own. Judy, who craved the stability of family and possessed a deeply nurturing heart, accepted the responsibility without hesitation, determined to give the young child every opportunity to succeed in life. Shortly after taking in Tasha, Judy met the love of her life, a warm and talented artist named Rolf Hebert. Rolf, who specialized in metalwork and art, fell deeply in love with Judy and embraced the opportunity to become a father to Tasha. The couple formally adopted Tasha and moved to northern Idaho, where they built a life centered around art, nature, and family. Despite their best efforts to provide a stable and loving upbringing, Tasha began to display signs of defiance and instability as she entered her teenage years, frequently running away, lying, and associating with troubled individuals. Despite the challenges and heartbreaks, Judy and Rolf never gave up on Tasha, continually offering their support and guidance. As Tasha grew into her 30s, she appeared to settle down to some degree, training as a certified nursing assistant and giving birth to a daughter in the year 2004. After a failed relationship with the child's father, Tasha met and married a man named Todd, who became her daughter's stepfather. Meanwhile, Judy's own life underwent a major transition when she and Rolf decided to divorce after decades of marriage. Although the separation was difficult for Judy, she and Rolf remained the closest of friends, and Judy began a new chapter of her life, by purchasing a home in Pasco, Washington, in March of the year 2007. Judy quickly became the anchor of her new neighborhood, beloved by her neighbors for her generous spirit, her extensive knowledge of gardening, and her willingness to help anyone in need. She lived peacefully by herself until January of the year 2011, when Tasha, Todd, and their young daughter arrived on her doorstep, having fallen on severe financial hardships. Unable to pay for their housing and lacking stable employment, Tasha turned to her mother for assistance. Driven by her deep love for her 7-year-old granddaughter and a desire to keep the young girl safe, Judy opened her heart and her home, inviting the family to live with her while they got back on their feet. The living arrangement, however, quickly became strained as Tasha and Todd struggled to maintain employment, relying heavily on Judy's financial support. Judy tried to remain positive, doting on her granddaughter and teaching her the secrets of her garden, hoping that the family would soon find their own place nearby. But the underlying tensions escalated dramatically, culminating in the tragic events of March 3, 2011. Following the discovery of Judy's body, Tasha was taken into custody for questioning, where she immediately claimed that she had acted in self-defense during a violent confrontation with her mother. Tasha told detectives a harrowing story, alleging that her mother had been acting erratically due to a change in her medication and had become increasingly hostile. She claimed that on the morning of the shooting, a bitter argument had erupted over a minor $3 charge on Judy's debit card, which Tasha admitted to using without permission. According to Tasha, her mother had confronted her, screaming and brandishing a small hand tool, which Tasha described as a black hatchet or an axe. Tasha claimed that the two had wrestled over the tool, during which she had struck her mother in the head to protect herself. She then claimed that she had run to her mother's bedroom closet, where she found a firearm in an open safe, and used it to defend herself against her mother's continued advance. As detectives listened to Tasha's narrative, they began to compare her statements with the physical evidence collected at the crime scene and the testimonies of other witnesses. A key interview was conducted with Tasha's 7-year-old daughter by a child interview specialist. The young girl described a far different atmosphere in the home, stating that her mother and grandmother had been arguing all day. She revealed that prior to the shooting, Tasha had brought her into the bedroom, turned the television volume up to its maximum level, and instructed her to stay inside. Shortly thereafter, the young girl heard the sound of gunfire. This crucial testimony suggested to investigators that the incident was not a sudden, defensive reaction, but rather a coordinated and planned event. When forensic investigators processed the home, they found physical signs of the violent struggle that Tasha had described. The house was orderly, with no disturbed furniture or signs of a chaotic physical altercation. Furthermore, the physical condition of Judy's body raised significant questions. While Tasha claimed she had struck her mother in the head with the hatchet during an active struggle, forensic analysis revealed that the severe head wound lacked any typical vital reaction, such as significant blood flow. This indicated that the injury had been inflicted after Judy's heart had already ceased beating, thoroughly refuting the claim that the head injury occurred during a mutual struggle over the weapon. The most telling piece of evidence, however, was found in the physical documents resting near Judy's body. Judy was discovered holding a file folder containing bank records and Tasha's birth certificate, along with a cordless telephone. Forensic examination of the file folder revealed a physical hole created by the passage of a projectile, along with trace evidence of the incident, matching the trajectory of the round that entered Judy S.'s chest. This evidence clearly demonstrated that Judy was holding the file folder and the telephone in her hands at the moment she was targeted, making it physically impossible for her to have been wielding a heavy hand tool or advancing on Tasha in a threatening manner. As investigators dug deeper into the financial records, the true motive for the crime began to take shape. The documents in the file folder proved that Tasha had been systematically stealing money from her mother's accounts. It became clear that Judy had discovered the theft, gathered the evidence, and was in the process of contacting the authorities to report her daughter when Tasha confronted her. The emergency call that had been cut short was indeed Judy's desperate attempt to seek help from the police, an attempt that was tragically silenced by her daughter. To fully understand the history of conflict between Tasha and Judy, detectives reached out to Rolf Hebert, Judy's husband and Tasha's adoptive father. Rolf, who made the 3-hour drive to Pasco immediately upon hearing the news, was devastated by the loss of his lifelong friend. He revealed that Tasha had always exhibited a manipulative and entitled attitude, always demanding more from her parents without showing gratitude. Rolf also shared a highly suspicious piece of information, revealing that in the days leading up to the tragedy, Tasha had called him, asking for the combination code to her mother's locked home safe. This revelation led investigators to conduct a thorough forensic search of the digital devices found in the home. On Tasha's mobile phone, they discovered a highly incriminating video recording. Tasha had strategically hidden her phone inside the bedroom closet, pointing the camera toward the key-coded safe in an attempt to capture footage of her mother entering the security combination. This discovery provided clear evidence of premeditation, proving that Tasha was actively plotting to gain unauthorized access to her mother's most secure personal documents and valuables. Within the safe, investigators found Judy's original legal will, which had designated Tasha as the primary beneficiary of her estate, including her home and financial assets. However, further investigation revealed that Judy had recently consulted with her attorney to alter the terms of her will. Having grown increasingly concerned about Tasha's financial exploitation and unstable behavior, Judy had changed the documents to place her assets into a secure trust for her 7-year-old granddaughter, ensuring that Tasha would not have direct access to the funds. Tasha had discovered this change and had even attempted to contact her daughter's biological father in an unsuccessful effort to alter the documents back to their original state. As the community began to process the shocking news of Judy's death, her neighbors came forward with additional chilling details about the weeks leading up to the tragedy. Ryan Rhodes, the neighbor who had alerted the police on the day of the shooting, shared a terrifying story that Judy had told him just a week prior. Judy had appeared on her porch, looking physically battered and bruised, explaining that she had survived a highly unusual incident in her garage. She told Ryan that Tasha's husband, Todd, had offered to help her measure the garage rafters for drywall installation. While she was holding one end of the measuring tape, a large plastic storage bin-filled vase-capté hat-heavy books had suddenly fallen from a high rafter, striking her directly on the head and pinning her to the concrete floor. Judy had expressed deep suspicion about the incident, noting that neither Tasha nor Todd had offered to take her to the hospital, despite her severe pain. She lay bedridden for several days before finally seeking medical attention, where she reported her pain as a 10 out of 10. Judy had confided in Ryan, stating that she believed the incident was a deliberate attempt on her life, and uttering the prophetic words that if she were ever to go missing, her neighbors should search the backyard. Out of fear for her own safety and a desire to establish a safety net, Judy and Ryan had even agreed upon a secret code word that Judy could use in an emergency to signal that the police should be called immediately. Tragically, the rapid escalation of events on the 3rd of March did not afford Judy the opportunity to use the code word. However, she had left behind one final powerful clue that would speak for her from beyond. When investigators searched Judy's bedroom and safe, they discovered a digital camera. Upon reviewing the files, they found photographs of the garage rafters, the heavy storage bin, and the surrounding area, matching the scene of the garage incident. Realizing that she was in grave danger, Judy had carefully documented the scene of the first attempt on her life, essentially conducting her ove kepna investigation, and ensuring that the evidence would be found even if she was no longer there to speak. With this new evidence of a prior attempted murder, the prosecution obtained an arrest warrant for Tasha's husband, Todd, who had abruptly left the residence on the 1st of March, just 2 days before the fatal shooting. After a thorough search, authorities located Todd in California, where he was working as a volunteer on a historic military vessel. Todd was taken into custody and charged with attempted murder in connection with the garage incident. He denied any involvement in Tasha's schemes, claiming he had left Washington simply to escape the constant domestic turmoil and his deteriorating marriage. Todd's trial took place in September of the year 2012, where a jury ultimately acquitted him of the charges. While investigators and prosecutors did not agree with the verdict, interviews with the jurors revealed that they viewed Tasha as the primary mastermind behind all the hostile actions against her mother, believing there was insufficient evidence to prove Todd's direct participation in the attempted murder. Tasha's own trial began 8 months later, in May of the year 2013. Throughout the proceedings, Tasha remained quiet and emotionless, presenting a stark contrast to the gravity of the allegations against her. The defense maintained the theory of self-defense, arguing that Judy had threatened Tasha with a hand tool, leaving her with no choice but to use lethal force. However, the prosecution systematically dismantled this narrative, using the physical evidence of the file folder, the trajectory of the bullet, the lack of vital reactions in the subsequent injuries, the young daughter's testimony regarding the elevated television volume, and the extensive digital evidence of financial theft and estate manipulation. The jury recognized that the crime was a premeditated act driven by greed, resentment, and the fear of legal accountability. After a 5-week trial, the jury deliberated for less than 2 days before returning a verdict of guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder with aggravated circumstances due to the presence of a child, and first-degree attempted murder. Tasha Stewart was sentenced to 45 years in prison, a resolution that brought a sense of justice to the community, though it could never replace the warm, generous spirit of Judy Hebert. The memory of Judy's kindness, her beautiful garden, and her ultimate act of maternal protection for her granddaughter remains a lasting testament to her character, reminding all of the enduring power of love and justice over greed and betrayal. The quiet community of Pasco, Washington, has long been appreciated for its peaceful neighborhoods, scenic surroundings, and a generally safe reputation that spans across the Tri-City area. Residents in this region often take comfort in the routine nature of their daily lives, expecting nothing more than the gentle flow of the Columbia River and the quiet warmth of their local neighborhoods. However, on March 3, 2011, this peaceful atmosphere was shattered by an event that would ultimately expose a deep-seated domestic tragedy. The incident began with a telephone call to the emergency services line, known to the public as 911. The call itself was brief, strange, and highly distressing to the dispatcher who answered. Initially, there was a voice that seemed to plead for help, followed by an abrupt disconnect. When the dispatcher initiated a standard call back to the residents to verify if there was an emergency, the line reconnected to reveal the persistent, high-pitched ringing of a smoke alarm or a smoke detector. A woman answered the phone, identifying herself as Tasha Stewart, and offered a quick explanation for the disturbance. She stated that everything was fine and that the alarm had simply gone off because she was attempting to change the battery. She apologized for the inconvenience, claimed she had to go, and ended the call. Despite the seemingly routine explanation, the dispatcher noted a distinct tone of distress in the caller's voice. Under standard police protocol, any hang-up or troubled call to the emergency services line requires a physical follow-up by law enforcement officers to ensure that no crime has been committed and that the occupants of the home are safe. An officer was dispatched to the residence to perform what is commonly referred to as a routine welfare check. It took approximately 14 minutes for the first responding officer to arrive at the single-story home. As the officer approached the front door, the sound of dogs barking could be heard from inside the house. Upon knocking, the officer was greeted by 37-year-old Tasha Stewart, who repeated her earlier explanation. She maintained that the smoke alarm had merely malfunctioned due to a battery change, and that there was no cause for concern. The officer, adhering to standard procedure, requested to enter the home to briefly inspect the premises and confirm that everyone inside was safe. Tasha agreed, but asked the officer to wait on the porch for a moment so she could secure the dogs in another room to prevent them from biting him. While the officer stood waiting on the front porch, a neighbor from across the street, a man named Ryan Rhodes, began to approach the property. Ryan was visibly anxious and gestured to the officer, questioning why more action was not being taken. Ryan had been working on the engine of his truck across the street when he heard two distinct and unmistakable sounds of gunfire coming from the house. He had seen the front window of the home literally pulse and shake from the concussive force of the shots, which were immediately followed by the ringing of the smoke detectors. Ryan walked over to the officer and flatly contradicted Tasha's story, stating that the noise was definitely not an exploding stove or a battery change, but rather multiple gunshots. He expressed immediate concern for the other occupants of the home, informing the officer that a young granddaughter and a sweet elderly lady also lived at the residence. Armed with this critical eyewitness information, the officer returned to the front door and knocked with greater urgency. When Tasha reopened the door, the officer did not wait on the porch any longer. He pushed his way into the entryway of the home and immediately looked down the hallway. There, lying motionless on the floor, was the body of 58-year-old Judy Hebert. Recognizing the severity of the situation, the officer immediately requested backup and medical assistance. A protective safety sweep of the home was conducted to ensure no other threats were present and to locate any other occupants. Fortunately, Tasha's 7-year-old daughter was found unharmed in another room. The child was gently escorted from the residence and placed in the care of a child interview specialist, while Tasha was detained in the back of a patrol vehicle as investigators worked to secure a search warrant for the home, officially transforming the residence into an active crime scene. To fully comprehend the tragic culmination of events that occurred on that March afternoon, it is essential to look back at the history of the family involved. Judy Hebert was born on June 13, 1952, in Amarillo, Texas. She entered the world alongside her twin sister, Jody. Although twins, the sisters possessed starkly different personalities and took very different paths in life. Judy was known by those who loved her as a reserved, warm, thoughtful, and deeply creative individual. She possessed a great talent for sewing and was an accomplished master gardener who took immense pride in cultivating beautiful plants and flowers. Judy had experienced a difficult childhood and maintained a complicated relationship with her mother, though she spoke of her father Vekepaite had immense warmth and affection. In contrast, her twin sister Jody led a highly unstable and transient lifestyle, eventually finding work in the adult entertainment industry. In 1972, 20-year-old Jody gave birth to a daughter whom she named Tasha. Realizing that her chaotic lifestyle prevented her from being an adequate parent, Jody reached out to her sister Judy for help, asking if she would raise the infant as her own. Judy, who valued family stability above all else, gladly stepped into the role of mother, wanting nothing more than to give the young child a stable and loving upbringing. While raising young Tasha, Judy met and fell in love with Rolf Hebert, a warm, intelligent artist and metal worker. Rolf embraced the role of father, and the couple eventually decided to legally adopt Tasha. The family moved several times, living in California and northern Idaho, where Rolf pursued his art and metal work. Throughout her adolescence, however, Tasha began to display a rebellious and wild streak that mirrored her biological mother-esque behavior. Despite Judy and Rolf's efforts to provide her with a stable, supportive environment, Tasha was a difficult child to raise. She frequently ran away, engaged in constant lying, and associated with troubled boyfriends. As Tasha entered adulthood, she appeared to settle down to some degree. She trained and worked as a certified nursing assistant, and in 2004, she gave birth to a daughter. After a relationship with the child's father, Charles, ended, Tasha met and married a man named Todd, who became the young girl's stepfather. While Tasha was attempting to build her own family, Judy's personal life underwent a major transition. After decades of marriage, Rolf requested a divorce. Although the separation was a profound shock to Judy, she and Rolf remained exceptionally close friends, and she always regarded him as the love of her life. At the age of 55, Judy decided to make a fresh start by purchasing a charming home in Pasco, Washington, in March of 2007. She quickly became the beloved anchor of her new neighborhood, known for her generosity, her beautiful garden, and her willingness to help anyone in need. Her quiet life was interrupted in January of 2011, when Tasha, Todd, and her 7-year-old granddaughter arrived on her doorstep. The young family had fallen on hard times, struggling with unemployment and facing the loss of their housing. Judy, motivated by a deep love for her granddaughter and a desire to keep the young girl safe, opened her home and invited them to live with her. The initial joy of having her family close by quickly faded as tension began to mount within the household. Tasha and Todd were unable to secure stable employment, leading to financial strain. To assist them, Judy occasionally allowed Tasha to use her debit card to purchase essentials like food and medicine. However, Tasha began using the card without permission, racking up unauthorized charges that quickly drew Judy S.'s suspicion. This unauthorized spending culminated in a massive domestic dispute on the morning of March 3, 2011, when Judy discovered an unauthorized charge on her account. According to Tasha's initial statement to detectives, her relationship with her mother had become increasingly volatile, which she blamed on a change in Judy S. medication. Tasha claimed that her husband, Todd, had actually moved out of the home 2 days prior to the shooting because the living environment had become too tumultuous. During her formal interrogation, Tasha presented a narrative of self-defense. She claimed that on the morning of the shooting, Judy had initiated an intense argument over a small debit card charge. Tasha claimed she called her father, Rolf, for advice on how to defuse the situation, and he advised her to stay calm and keep her distance. Tasha alleged that as she attempted to walk away, Judy began screaming, ranting about death, and suddenly brandished a heavy black object, which she initially described to responding officers as an axe or a hatchet. Tasha claimed that a violent struggle ensued over the weapon, during which she managed to wrest it from Judy and strike her in the head with it. Despite suffering a head wound, Judy supposedly regained control of the weapon and continued her assault. Tasha claimed that she then fled to the master bedroom closet, where she remembered Judy kept a handgun in a safe. She claimed that the safe had been left open earlier that day after she asked her mother for her birth certificate. Tasha stated that she retrieved the .37 .55 caliber revolver from a bag inside the safe and fired 3 shots at her mother to save her own life. While Tasha's self-defense claim might have appeared plausible on the surface, investigators quickly began to uncover significant discrepancies that completely dismantled her story. The first major red aphmau came from the interview with Tasha's 7-year-old daughter. The young girl told a child interview specialist that her mother and grandmother had been arguing all day. She revealed that at one point, Tasha had escorted her into a bedroom, turned the television volume up to its absolute maximum level, and instructed her to stay put. It was only after the television was turned up that the child heard the sound of gunshots. This crucial piece of testimony strongly suggested to investigators that the incident was not a sudden, spontaneous act of self-defense, but rather a coordinated effort to conceal the sounds of violence from the child. As forensic investigators meticulously processed the crime scene, the physical evidence further contradicted Tasha's narrative. While Tasha claimed a violent struggle had taken place throughout the house, the interior of the home was remarkably orderly, with no signs of overturned furniture or disturbed items. The .37 .55 revolver was recovered from the hallway floor, and nearby lay the heavy black hatchet. However, the positioning of the victim's body and the items she was holding told a completely different story. Judy was found holding a cordless telephone in one hand and a file folder in the other. Forensic analysis of the file folder revealed a clean bullet hole through the documents, along with blood spatter on the exterior. This physical evidence proved that Judy was holding the file folder directly in front of her chest when the single fatal bullet passed through the folder, through her hand, and into her chest. This finding made Tasha's claim that Judy was actively swinging a heavy hatchet physically impossible, as a person cannot simultaneously wield a heavy two-handed weapon while holding a cordless telephone and a file folder. Furthermore, a detailed examination of Judy's body by the medical examiner revealed a deep 2-inch gash on her scalp that penetrated to her skull, consistent with being struck by a blunt object like a hatchet. Crucially, the medical examiner noted a complete absence of blood flowing from this severe head wound. Because head injuries notoriously bleed heavily, when a person is alive, the lack of bleeding indicated that Judy S. heart had already stopped pumping when the blow to her head was delivered. This forensic detail proved that the hatchet blow occurred after Judy had already been shot and killed, completely exposing Tasha's claim of an active struggle as a fabrication. Investigators concluded that Tasha had shot her mother first and then used the hatchet on the deceased body before placing the weapon near her hands to stage a scene of self-defense. The contents of the file folder that Judy was holding at the moment of her death provided the ultimate motive for the crime. The folder contained detailed bank records showcasing Tasha S. unauthorized spending, alongside Tasha S.'s birth certificate. Investigators deduced that Judy had gathered these documents to confront Tasha and was in the process of calling the police to report the theft when Tasha shot her to prevent her arrest. The motive was not merely a dispute over a small debit card charge, but a desperate, calculated effort by Tasha to cover up her financial exploitation of her mother and secure her inheritance. To understand the broader context of the family dynamic and the events leading up to the murder, detectives interviewed Judy S. ex-husband, Rolf Hebert. Rolf was devastated by the news of Judy S.'s death and cooperated fully with the investigation. He revealed that Tasha had always possessed a highly manipulative and demanding personality, consistently feeling that nothing she was given was ever enough. Rolf disclosed a highly suspicious detail. A few days prior to the shooting, Tasha had called him, desperately asking for the combination code to Judy's home safe, claiming she needed to retrieve some personal papers. Rolf had refused to give her the code. However, when forensic technicians analyzed Tasha's mobile phone, they discovered a highly incriminating video recording. Tasha had secretly positioned her phone inside the closet, hiding it among clothing, to record Judy as she entered the combination code into the digital keypad of the safe. This recording allowed Tasha to bypass the security and gain unauthorized access to the safe's contents. Inside the safe, Judy kept her original will, which designated Tasha as her primary beneficiary, inheriting the home, money, and personal belongings. However, because of Tasha's ongoing financial exploitation, Judy had recently visited her attorney and modified her will. The revised document placed her assets into a protective trust for her 7-year-old granddaughter, ensuring that Tasha could not directly access the funds. Tasha had discovered this change and had actively attempted to reverse it. She had even reached out to her daughter's biological father, Charles, asking him to co-sign a document that would grant her power of attorney and allow her to alter Judy's estate planning. Charles had refused to participate in the scheme, but investigators found a drafted copy of the altered will in Tasha's bedroom, demonstrating her calculated intent to seize control of her mother's assets. As the investigation deepened, neighbors came forward with shocking revelations that suggested the shooting on March 3rd was not the first time Tasha had attempted to take her mother's life. Ryan Rhodes, the neighbor who had alerted the police to the gunshots, recalled a terrifying conversation he had with Judy just a week before her death. Judy had appeared physically bruised and battered, looking incredibly frail. She confided in Ryan about a highly suspicious incident that had occurred in her garage some weeks earlier. Tasha's husband, Todd, had offered to help Judy measure her garage for new drywall. While Judy was holding one end of a measuring tape on the garage floor, a massive storage bin filled the kepaite, hot, heavy books, suddenly fell from the overhead rafters, striking her directly on the head and pinning her to the ground. Judy was severely injured and bruised, but Tasha and Todd refused to take her to the hospital immediately, keeping her bedridden at home for several days before she finally received medical care. Judy confided in her neighbors that she did not believe the incident was an accident. She expressed a deep fear that Tasha and Todd were actively trying to kill her. In a heartbreaking revelation, Judy told Ryan that if he ever came over and found her missing, he should look for her buried in the backyard. The neighbors had even established a secret code word with Judy, agreeing that if she ever called and uttered the code word, they would immediately contact the police. Tragically, Judy never had the opportunity to use the code word, as her fear of losing access to her beloved granddaughter kept her from reporting her suspicions to law enforcement. She tolerated the dangerous environment solely to remain close to the young girl and protect her from Tasha's toxic influence. When investigators searched the garage to verify this story, they found clear physical evidence supporting the neighbor's account. Dust on the cab of a vehicle parked in the garage had been clearly disturbed, indicating that someone had climbed up to the rafters, where the heavy bin was stored. More remarkably, detectives recovered a digital camera from Judy's safe. When they reviewed the images stored on the memory card, they found detailed photographs of the garage rafters, the storage bins, and the heavy books, taken from the exact angles of the incident. It became clear to the police that Judy had effectively investigated her own attempted murder, documenting the evidence of the crime and storing it in her safe, as a silent testament to the danger she faced. She was, quite literally, speaking to the investigators from beyond the grave. This discovery led to the issuance of an arrest warrant for Todd on charges of attempted murder related to the garage incident. Todd had fled the state shortly before the shooting, and investigators launched a multi-state search to locate him. He was eventually tracked down to California, where he was found working as a volunteer aboard the United States ship Hornet, a historic aircraft carrier. On January 17, 2012, Todd was taken into custody. During his interrogation, he denied any involvement in the garage incident or any knowledge of Tasha's murderous plans, claiming he had simply left the home because he was exhausted by the constant conflict between Tasha and her mother. Todd went to trial in September of 2012 and was ultimately acquitted of all charges by a jury, which viewed Tasha as the sole mastermind behind the crimes. Tasha Stewart's trial began in May of 2013. Throughout the proceedings, Tasha remained entirely emotionless, refusing to testify in her own defense. Her legal team attempted to argue self-defense, presenting her as a small, frail woman who had been forced to protect herself from her mother's alleged hatchet attack. However, the prosecution systematically dismantled this defense using the overwhelming forensic evidence: the testimony of the 7-year-old daughter, the digital evidence from Tasha's phone, and the tragic photographic evidence left behind by Judy herself. The clear financial motive, combined with the extreme premeditation demonstrated by the staged crime scene and the prior attempt on Judy's life, left no doubt in the minds of the jury. After a 5-week trial, the jury deliberated for less than 2 days before finding Tasha Stewart guilty of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances due to the presence of a child in the home, as well as first-degree attempted murder. She was sentenced to 45 years in prison. This tragic case offers profound lessons regarding the motives behind domestic crimes and the psychological patterns that often precede them. It highlights the devastating consequences of financial greed, manipulation, and the tragic vulnerability of elderly individuals who put their love for their families ahead of their own safety. The case also underscores the critical importance of community vigilance, as demonstrated by the neighbor, Ryan Rhodes, whose quick thinking and insistence on speaking to the police ultimately prevented Tasha from successfully covering up the homicide. It serves as a powerful reminder of the meticulous nature of modern forensic science, which can piece together the truth even when the primary witness has been silenced. Through the careful analysis of physical, digital, and circumstantial evidence, justice was ultimately served, honoring the memory of a beloved grandmother who sought only to protect her family. The delicate balance of trust and security within a household is a foundation upon which human society is built. Yet history occasionally reveals instances where this sanctuary is compromised by the very individuals entrusted with its care. In the quiet, scenic environs of the city of Pasco, Washington, known for its tranquil atmosphere and close-knit neighborhoods, a tragic series of events unfolded in the early spring of the year 2011 that would challenge the local community and provide a profound case study for investigators, psychologists, and legal analysts alike. The incident, which involved the untimely and tragic loss of a beloved grandmother named Judy, highlights the complex interplay of financial desperation, psychological codependency, and the ultimate triumph of meticulous investigative work over poorly constructed deception. By examining the structural failures that lead to such domestic tragedies, the forensic clues that unravel fabricated narratives, and the preventative measures that communities can adopt, society can glean invaluable lessons on safeguarding the vulnerable and ensuring that justice is served. To understand the tragedy, one must first look at the peaceful afternoon of March 3, 2011, when the silence of a suburban street in Pasco was interrupted by a brief and unsettling telephone call to the emergency services. The local dispatch center received a 911 call that disconnected almost immediately, a situation that standard protocol dictates must be investigated further. When the dispatcher placed a callback to the residence, a female voice answered, claiming that the disturbance was merely the result of a safety alarm being triggered while she attempted to replace its batteries. Despite the caller's attempt to downplay the situation with a casual explanation, her tone conveyed an underlying distress that did not escape the attention of the experienced dispatcher. This subtle detail prompted the dispatch of a patrol officer to the residence to perform a welfare check, a routine procedure that often serves as the first line of defense against domestic crises. Upon arriving at the single-story home approximately 14 minutes later, the responding officer was met at the entrance by a 37-year-old resident named Tasha, who reiterated the claim that a minor kitchen mishap involving a stove had triggered the smoke detectors. However, the veneer of normalcy was quickly dismantled by the arrival of a vigilant neighbor, Ryan, who lived across the street. Ryan had been working on his vehicle when he heard distinct, sharp sounds resembling discharges from a firearm emanating from the house, followed by the vibration of a window and the persistent ringing of smoke alarms. Recognizing the potential danger to the other occupants of the home, specifically Tasha's mother and her 7-year-old daughter, the neighbor insisted that the officer investigate further. The officer's decision to bypass the initial excuses and enter the residence proved crucial, as it led to the discovery of Judy, 58 years of age, lying unresponsive in the hallway. The initial response of law enforcement in the immediate aftermath of this discovery was characterized by swift and organized action. Medical personnel were summoned to render aid, though it was soon determined that Judy had already succumbed to her injuries. The physical environment of the home was secured, and the young granddaughter was gently escorted from the premises to a safe location where a child interview specialist could speak with her. This step was vital, as children in traumatic situations require specialized care to ensure their emotional well-being while preserving any potential observations they might have made. Meanwhile, Tasha was detained for questioning as detectives secured the necessary legal authorizations to conduct a thorough search of the residence as a crime scene. As the investigation commenced, detectives sought to understand the history of the household, which revealed a narrative of deep maternal devotion met with escalating conflict. Judy, born on June 13, 1952 in Texas, was remembered by those who knew her as a warm, creative, and nurturing soul. An accomplished artist and master gardener, she was known for her generosity and her deep affection for her family. Decades earlier, Judy and her former husband, Rolf, had made the compassionate decision to adopt and raise Tasha, who was the biological child of Judy's twin sister, Jody. Despite facing significant behavioral challenges during Tasha's youth, Judy and Rolf provided her with every available opportunity to succeed, supporting her career path as a certified nursing assistant and welcoming her back whenever she faced hardships. The vulnerability of the family dynamic became pronounced in January of the year 2011, when Tasha, along with her husband Todd and her young daughter, faced housing instability and financial distress. True to her supportive nature, Judy opened her home to them, hoping to provide a stable environment for her beloved granddaughter, with whom she shared an exceptionally close bond. However, the arrangement quickly generated friction. The adult children struggled to maintain steady employment, leading to financial strain and an increasing dependence on Judy's resources. This financial imbalance became the primary source of contention, culminating in unauthorized access to Judy's financial accounts, including her debit card, which Judy discovered shortly before her passing. During her initial interview with detectives, Tasha presented a narrative centered on self-defense, claiming that a sudden and violent argument over a small financial discrepancy had escalated. She asserted that her mother had advanced toward her with a small hand axe, forcing her to engage in a physical struggle before retrieving a firearm from an open security safe in the master bedroom. According to Tasha, she fired the weapon in fear for her life. This account, however, began to lose credibility when compared with the physical evidence and the testimony of her young daughter, who revealed that the conflict had persisted for much of the day and that Tasha had instructed her to remain in a bedroom with the television volume elevated to its maximum level before the loud noises occurred. The discrepancy between the perpetrator's self-defense claim and the actual physical reality of the scene highlight a common theme in domestic offenses, where the perpetrator attempts to manipulate the physical environment to support a fabricated story. However, forensic analysis often reveals subtle details that cannot be easily staged. In this instance, investigators noted that the residence showed no signs of a chaotic struggle. The furniture was orderly, and the home remained tidy. Furthermore, Judy was discovered holding a cordless telephone and a cardboard folder containing bank statements and vital records. A detailed examination of the folder revealed a clean penetration path matching the trajectory of the single fatal injury, indicating that Judy was holding the documents in front of her when the incident occurred. This physical reality made it structurally impossible for her to have been wielding a heavy tool in a threatening manner at the same time. An additional critical forensic detail emerged from the examination of a head injury Judy had sustained. Investigators noted a significant lack of vital reaction, specifically the absence of active bleeding that typically accompanies cranial injuries in living individuals. This indicated that the injury to the head was inflicted after her cardiac function had ceased, suggesting an attempt to stage the scene or ensure the fatal outcome after the initial event. The presence of the hand axe near the body, combined with the lack of biological evidence supporting a struggle, further undermined the self-defense narrative, revealing instead a calculated effort to mislead the responding officers. As detectives searched the master bedroom, they uncovered further evidence of premeditation that shifted the focus from a spontaneous confrontation to a planned financial acquisition. Within the security safe, which Tasha claimed had been left open by chance, investigators located a personal camera belonging to Judy. Upon reviewing the digital media, they discovered photographs depicting the rafters of the garage and a heavy storage container filled hot to hot books. These images matched the details of an incident that had occurred several weeks prior, in which a large container had fallen from the ceiling of the garage, causing significant injuries to Judy. At the time, Judy had expressed deep suspicion to her neighbors, suggesting that the event was not an accident, but a coordinated attempt on her life by Tasha and Todd, under the guise of home improvement work. The discovery of the camera and the photographic evidence demonstrated that Judy had effectively documented her own suspicions, creating a silent record of the threats she faced. Neighbors recalled that Judy had become increasingly fearful for her safety, even establishing a covert code word with a trusted friend to signal the need for emergency assistance. Despite her apprehension, Judy's profound desire to protect her granddaughter and maintain access to her prevented her from seeking formal intervention from law enforcement. This reluctance underscores the complex emotional barriers that victims of domestic abuse often face, where the safety of a child or the desire to preserve family unity outweighs personal safety concerns. The financial motive behind the tragedy was fully illuminated when investigators examined Judy's estate planning documents. Finding that Tasha had been engaging in unauthorized transactions, Judy had taken steps to alter her legal testament, diverting her assets and her home into a structured trust designed solely for the benefit of her granddaughter, thereby removing Tasha as the direct beneficiary. In response, Tasha had attempted to obtain the security code to the safe, even placing a mobile phone in a concealed location within the closet to record Judy entering the combination. Files retrieved from the home indicated that Tasha had also prepared draft documents attempting to reinstate her status as the primary beneficiary, highlighting a clear, financially driven motive for her actions. The prosecution of the case proceeded in two distinct phases, beginning with the trial of Todd in September of the year 2012. Although Todd had departed the residence days before the fatal event and was ultimately acquitted of the charges related to the previous garage incident, the legal proceedings established a clear framework of the family dynamics and the planned nature of the financial schemes. Tasha's trial commenced in May of the year 2013, where the defense maintained the narrative of self-defense. However, the overwhelming physical evidence, the forensic analysis of the documents, the timeline established by the neighbor's observations, and the child's testimony left little room for doubt. The jury returned a verdict of guilty for first-degree murder, with aggravating circumstances, resulting in a sentence of 45 years of confinement. This tragic case offers several profound lessons regarding the prevention of domestic violence and the identification of coercive control within families. It highlights the importance of community vigilance, as exemplified by the neighbor, Ryan, whose insistence that the officer investigate further was the critical factor in exposing the crime. Without his timely intervention, the fabricated story of a minor kitchen accident might have delayed the discovery, allowing the scene to be further altered. Communities must encourage an environment where neighbors look out for one another and feel empowered to report unusual occurrences to the authorities, recognizing that early intervention can save lives. Furthermore, the case emphasizes the need for robust support systems for elderly individuals who may find themselves financially or emotionally dependent on younger family members, or conversely, who take in younger relatives out of a sense of duty. Financial exploitation of the elderly is a growing concern that often escalates into physical danger. Legal professionals, financial institutions, and community organizations must work together to identify warning signs, such as sudden changes to estate documents, unauthorized card usage, or isolation from friends. By implementing protective measures and encouraging open discussions about estate planning and personal safety, families can prevent situations where financial desperation leads to tragic outcomes. From an investigative standpoint, the rapid resolution of the case demonstrates the value of meticulous scene documentation and the preservation of digital evidence. The retrieval of the victim's camera, the analysis of mobile phone files, and the careful examination of physical trajectories all serve to dismantle a deceptive narrative. Law enforcement agencies can enhance their response capabilities by continuing to train officers in the identification of staged crime scenes, the biological indicators of trauma, and the sensitive interviewing of young witnesses. By combining advanced forensic techniques with a compassionate, victim-centered approach, the justice system can ensure that the truth is uncovered and that those who seek to cause harm are held accountable. Ultimately, the story of Judy is one of enduring love for her family, particularly her granddaughter, contrasted with the destructive consequences of unchecked greed and manipulation. While her life was cut short, her foresight in documenting her experiences and the dedication of the investigating officers ensured that her voice was heard. The resolution of the case stands as a testament to the importance of truth, the vigilance of the community, and the persistent pursuit of justice by law enforcement, offering a sobering reminder of the need to protect the vulnerable and cherish the safety of our homes. The study of domestic crimes reveals a disturbing paradox where the sanctuary of the home becomes the stage for betrayal. In analyzing cases where family dynamics deteriorate into violence, criminologists often observe a slow accumulation of psychological tension, financial desperation, and manipulative behavior. These cases do not occur in a vacuum. Rather, they are the culmination of unresolved conflicts, behavioral patterns, and an escalation of boundary-crossing actions that eventually pierce the natural protective instincts of familial bonds. The frequency of such tragic occurrences often stems from the misplaced trust of the victims, who, driven by unconditional love, overlook warning signs that would otherwise alert them to danger in any other context. This profound vulnerability is precisely what perpetrators exploit, relying on the victim's reluctance to involve law enforcement or expose family secrets to the community. To understand the mechanics of these events, one must look closely at the city of Pasco, Washington, which is situated within a peaceful tri-city area known for its scenic beauty and stable, secure neighborhoods. On the afternoon of March 3, 2011, this tranquility was shattered by a sequence of events that began with a highly unusual emergency call. When the 911 dispatch center received the call, the line abruptly disconnected. Standard emergency protocols dictate that dispatchers must immediately attempt to reconnect with any hang-up calls to ensure public safety. Upon redialing, the dispatcher successfully re-established contact, but the audio feed carried a distinct, persistent ringing sound that was instantly recognizable as a household smoke alarm. The female voice on the other end of the line offered a hurried, dismissive explanation, claiming that the alarm had been triggered while she was attempting to change the battery on a smoke detector. She insisted that everything was fine and quickly ended the conversation. Despite this reassuring explanation, the experienced dispatcher noted a subtle undertone of distress and urgency in the caller's voice. In accordance with established law enforcement procedures, any unresolved or suspicious 911 hang-up requires an in-person welfare check. An officer was dispatched to the residence, arriving approximately 14 minutes after the initial call. As the officer approached the front door, he could hear dogs barking inside. The woman who answered the door was 37 years of age and identified herself as Tasha Stewart. She reiterated the story about a false alarm, claiming that a minor mishap on the kitchen stove had caused a temporary burst of smoke, but that no actual emergency existed. She requested a moment to secure her dogs in another room so they would not pose a threat to the officer, leaving him waiting on the porch. While the officer waited, a critical intervention occurred that completely shifted the trajectory of the response. A neighbor from across the street, Ryan Rhodes, approached the officer with an expression of intense concern. Rhodes, who had been working on his vehicle's engine in his driveway, reported that he had clearly heard the unmistakable sound of 2 gunshots originating from the house. He described seeing the front window pulse and shake from the concussive force of the discharges, followed immediately by the sound of the smoke alarms ringing. Rhodes explained that he knew 3 people resided in the home, including an elderly woman and a 7-year-old girl. He urged the officer to investigate further, expressing absolute certainty that the situation was far more dangerous than a simple kitchen accident. Armed with this vital eyewitness testimony, the officer returned to the front door and knocked with renewed urgency. When Tasha Stewart opened the door, the officer bypassed her and entered the hallway. Ahead of him, lying motionless on the floor, was the body of 58-year-old Judy Hebert. Recognizing the gravity of the scene, the officer immediately summoned medical personnel and backup units to secure the premises and search for any additional individuals inside. During a rapid safety sweep of the home, officers located the 7-year-old daughter of Tasha Stewart in a bedroom, safe from physical harm. She was quickly escorted from the residence by a child interview specialist to ensure her well-being while the scene was secured. The victim, Judy Hebert, was born on June 13, 1952, in Amarillo, Texas, alongside her twin sister, Jody. While the twin sisters shared an identical genetic heritage, their paths in life diverged significantly. Judy was known for her reserved, thoughtful, and deeply nurturing personality. She possessed a remarkable talent for sewing, artistic endeavors, and gardening, eventually earning a reputation as a master gardener who took great pride in cultivating beautiful plants and sharing her knowledge with her neighbors. Her sister, Jody, led a much more transient and unstable life, which ultimately led to the birth of her daughter, Tasha, in 1972. Recognizing her own inability to provide a stable upbringing, Jody asked Judy to raise the infant. Judy, despite her own modest financial means, accepted the responsibility without hesitation, desiring to give the child every possible opportunity for a stable and loving life. Judy eventually met Rolf Hebert, an artist and metalworker who possessed a warm and friendly demeanor. The couple married and formally adopted Tasha, raising her as their own daughter. Throughout Tasha's youth, the family moved across several states, including California and Idaho, attempting to provide her with a supportive environment. However, as Tasha reached her teenage years, she began to display patterns of behavioral instability, frequently running away, engaging in deceptive behavior, and aligning herself with troublesome associates. Despite these challenges, Judy and Rolf remained dedicated to her, hoping that maturity would guide her toward a more stable path. By the age of 30, Tasha appeared to have found some stability, training as a certified nursing assistant, and giving birth to a daughter in 2004. Following a dissolution of her relationship with her child's biological father, Charles, she married a man named Todd. Around the same time, Judy experienced a profound personal transition when her marriage of several decades to Rolf ended in divorce. Despite the separation, Judy and Rolf maintained a deep, lifelong friendship. At the age of 55, Judy chose to begin a new chapter by purchasing a home in Pasco, Washington. In March of 2007, she quickly became a beloved fixture of the neighborhood, known for her generosity and her beautifully maintained garden. The domestic dynamic changed dramatically in January of 2011 when Tasha, Todd, and their young daughter arrived at Judy's doorstep, having fallen into severe financial distress. Lacking stable employment and unable to maintain their own housing, they appealed to Judy for assistance. Driven by an overwhelming desire to ensure the safety and well-being of her 7-year-old granddaughter, Judy welcomed the family into her home. She relished the opportunity to bond with her granddaughter, spending hours teaching her gardening techniques and creating a supportive environment. The long-term plan was for Tasha and Todd to secure employment and transition into their own residence nearby, but this transition never materialized. Instead, financial tensions began to mount within the household. Following the discovery of Judy's body, investigators took Tasha Stewart into custody for questioning, while forensic specialists processed the crime scene. During her initial interviews, Tasha presented a narrative of self-defense. She claimed that her mother had been exhibiting erratic behavior, which she attributed to a change in her medication. Tasha asserted that her husband, Todd, had left the home 2 days prior to the incident because the domestic atmosphere had become too volatile. According to Tasha, a severe argument had erupted on the morning of March 3rd over a minor financial matter involving a $3 charge on Judy's debit card. Tasha admitted that she and Todd had used Judy's financial cards without authorization due to their lack of income, which had provoked Judy's anger. Tasha claimed that during this confrontation, Judy became highly agitated and brandished a dark, heavy object, which she initially described as a hatchet or an axe. Tasha asserted that a physical struggle ensued throughout the hallway and bedroom, during which she managed to wrestle the object away and strike her mother in the head. Despite this blow, Tasha claimed that Judy continued the assault. Tasha stated that she then retreated to her mother's master bedroom, where she knew a firearm was stored inside a security safe. She claimed that the safe had been left open after she had previously requested her birth certificate from her mother. Tasha asserted that she retrieved a loaded .357 caliber revolver from the safe and fired in self-defense to halt her mother's advance. While this narrative was designed to evoke sympathy and establish a legal justification for her actions, investigators immediately began to identify profound inconsistencies in the physical evidence. A thorough examination of the residence revealed no signs of a violent struggle. The furnitures remained undisturbed, and the household items were neatly arranged. The physical placement of the evidence further undermined Tasha's account. Investigators located a hatchet positioned approximately 12 to 18 inches from Judy's body. However, when forensic specialists examined the head wound on the victim, they noted a critical scientific anomaly. The laceration did not exhibit the substantial bleeding typical of a head injury sustained by a living person. This lack of hemorrhaging indicated that the blow to the head had been delivered after Judy's heart had already ceased pumping, directly contradicting Tasha's claim of an ongoing physical struggle with an armed assailant. Furthermore, investigators discovered that at the moment she was shot, Judy was holding a cordless telephone in one hand and a cardboard file folder in the other. A detailed inspection of the file folder revealed a ballistic entry hole surrounded by microparticles of blood spatter. This evidence demonstrated that the projectile had passed directly through the documents before striking the victim. The presence of the file folder and the telephone in the victim's hands made it physically impossible for her to have been swinging a heavy hatchet at her daughter, as Tasha had claimed. The physical reality of the scene suggested that Judy was attempting to make an emergency call while holding documents that documented Tasha's unauthorized financial activities. To reconstruct the timeline of the event, investigators analyzed the initial 911 call. In the background of the brief recording, a sharp acoustic signature resembling a gunshot could be heard, followed by faint, distorted voices pleading for help and demanding that something be handed over before the line went dead. The acoustic evidence, combined with the activation of the smoke detector due to the particulate matter released by the high-caliber firearm, painted a clear picture of an interrupted emergency call rather than a sudden defensive reaction. The testimony of the 7-year-old granddaughter provided additional clarity. During her interview with a child specialist, the young girl revealed that her mother and grandmother had been engaged in prolonged arguments throughout the day. She recalled that shortly before the loud noise occurred, Tasha had escorted her into a bedroom, turned the television volume to an exceptionally high level, and instructed her to remain inside. This deliberate action suggested a degree of premeditation, indicating that Tasha sought to prevent her daughter from overhearing the confrontation and the subsequent use of the firearm. As investigators searched for a deeper motive, they examined the contents of the open safe in Judy's bedroom. Within the safe, they located several financial documents, bank records, and legal papers. They also recovered a digital camera belonging to Judy. When forensic technicians reviewed the images stored on the camera's memory card, they discovered photographs depicting the rafters of the garage, a large storage bin, and scattered books. These photographs corresponded precisely to a highly suspicious incident that had occurred several weeks prior to the shooting. Neighbors of the victim, including Ryan Rhodes, provided crucial context regarding this earlier event. They recounted that Judy had emerged from her home physically bruised and shaken, explaining that a heavy plastic storage bin filled the kepite. Hot books had fallen from the garage rafters, striking her directly on the head and pinning her to the concrete floor. Judy had been accompanied in the garage by her son-in-law, Todd, who was supposedly helping her measure the space for drywall. In the days following the incident, Judy expressed deep suspicion to her trusted neighbors, noting that neither Tasha nor Todd had offered to transport her to the hospital immediately, despite her severe pain. She eventually sought medical evaluation 5 days later, reporting extreme physical discomfort. Judy confided in her neighbors that she believed the incident in the garage was not an accident, but rather a deliberate attempt on her life. She took the initiative to photograph the scene in the garage, documenting the disturbed dust on top of a parked vehicle where someone had clearly climbed to access the rafters. This self-conducted investigation, preserved on her digital camera, served as a powerful testimony from beyond the grave, illustrating her awareness of the danger she faced. She had even established a code word with her neighbor, instructing him to contact law enforcement immediately if she ever used the word during their conversations or if she suddenly went missing. Tragically, the speed of the final confrontation prevented her from utilizing this safety mechanism. The financial motive became fully apparent when investigators explored the status of Judy S. estate. Originally, Judy S. Legal will designated Tasha as the sole beneficiary of her home, savings, and personal property. However, after discovering that Tasha had been systematically stealing from her bank accounts, Judy visited her attorney to revise her estate planning. The updated will stripped Tasha of her direct inheritance, placing the assets into a protected trust for the benefit of her 7-year-old granddaughter, with measures to ensure Tasha could not access the funds. Investigators discovered that Tasha had been actively searching for a way to bypass these restrictions. A video recovered from Tasha S. mobile phone revealed that she had secretly positioned the device inside a closet to record her mother entering the security combination on the safe. Furthermore, Tasha had drafted a fraudulent document attempting to restore herself as the primary beneficiary and had unsuccessfully approached her daughter S.'s biological father, Charles, to assist in securing a power of attorney. Following the collection of this extensive evidence, a warrant was issued for the arrest of Todd on charges of attempted murder related to the garage incident. Todd had fled the area shortly before the shooting and was eventually located in California, where he was working as a volunteer on the United States ship Hornet, a historic aircraft carrier. He was taken into custody and returned to Washington to stand trial. In September of 2012, Todd was acquitted of the attempted murder charges by a jury that ultimately viewed Tasha as the primary instigator and mastermind behind the actions. Tasha Stewardess. Trial commenced in May of 2013. The defense argued that the physical confrontation justified the use of force, presenting Tasha as a soft-spoken, non-threatening individual. However, the prosecution systematically dismantled this narrative using the forensic evidence. The bullet hole through the financial file folder, the lack of vital reaction in the victim's head wound, the high volume of the television set, and the secret video recording of the safe combination. The jury deliberated for less than 2 days before finding Tasha Stewart guilty of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances. Due to the presence of a minor in the home and first-degree attempted murder, she was subsequently sentenced to 45 years in prison. The resolution of this case underscores several profound life lessons regarding the prevention of domestic tragedies and the critical role of community vigilance. It highlights the necessity of recognizing early warning signs of financial exploitation and psychological manipulation within families. Often, victims of domestic abuse or financial elder abuse hesitate to report these behaviors due to a desire to protect their relatives or preserve family unity. This case demonstrates that early intervention, direct communication with law enforcement, and the utilization of community support structures are essential to preventing escalation. For law enforcement agencies, this case highlights the immense value of thoroughly investigating routine calls, such as 911 hang-ups, and actively listening to neighbors and community members. The attentiveness of the responding officer to the neighboress observations was the pivotal factor that led to the immediate discovery of the crime, preventing the destruction of evidence and the potential flight of the suspect. By maintaining rigorous protocols for welfare checks and fostering strong relationships with neighborhood residents, police forces can respond more rapidly and effectively to hidden crises, ultimately ensuring that justice is served and vulnerable individuals are protected. Model Chinza Foot PM. In the heart of Washington, the city of Pasco is a place often painted in hues of tranquility, known for its scenic beauty and a reputation for safety that stands as a point of pride within the Tri-City area. It is a community where neighbors know each other, where the rhythm of life is steady and reassuring. But on the 3rd of March, in the year 2011, this peaceful veneer was pierced by a strange and unsettling call to the emergency dispatch center. The voice on the line was fractured, the message lost in a cacophony of distress and the piercing wail of an alarm. The call was a hang-up, a brief, desperate connection to the outside world that was severed as quickly as it was made. Standard procedure in jhene instances is clear and unwavering. A dispatcher must call back. When the connection was established, the sound that greeted the dispatcher was not one of calm reassurance, but the insistent, high-pitched ringing of what sounded like a smoke detector. A woman's voice, strained and breathless, offered a hurried explanation. She was sorry, she said. The alarm had just gone off. She had been trying to change the battery. Yes, on the smoke detector. Everything was okay, she insisted before abruptly stating she had to go. Despite the seemingly plausible explanation, the undercurrent of distress in the caller's voice was unmistakable, a subtle but potent signal that something was profoundly wrong. Police procedure, born from countless similar situations where a simple explanation masked a deeper crisis, dictated that an officer must conduct a follow-up visit, a welfare check, to ensure that all was truly well. It was a routine dispatch, one of many that fill an officer's day, a standard response to a 911 hang-up call, to verify that no problem existed. The officer who arrived at the residence knew the context of the call. He was responding to a person who claimed the emergency signal was nothing more than a malfunctioning smoke detector. It took approximately 14 minutes for the initial response unit to reach the home. Walking up the path, the officer noted the quiet of the suburban street, a stark contrast to the urgency that had prompted his visit. He knocked on the door, the sound echoing slightly in the afternoon air. From inside, the barking of dogs could be heard, The door opened, and a woman identifying herself as 37-year-old Tasha Stewart stood before him. She reiterated the story she had told the dispatcher. A fire alarm had gone off, triggering the 911 call. It was no big deal, she implied, a simple household nuisance. The officer, however, remained firm. He explained that he needed to come inside to make sure a crime had not been committed, to verify with his own eyes that the situation was as she described. Tasha agreed, but said she needed a moment to put the dogs away so they wouldn't bite him. As the officer waited on the porch, a moment of unexpected intervention occurred. A neighbor from across the street, a man named Ryan Rhodes, began approaching him, a look of concern etched on his face. He gestured with his hands. A non-verbal question that seemed to ask, "Aren't you going to do something?" Ryan had been working on his truck's engine when his day was violently interrupted. He had heard the distinct, sharp report of a firearm coming from inside the house across the street. Then he heard a second one. He saw the window of the home pulse, a subtle but violent shake, and then heard the smoke detectors begin their relentless ringing from within. He watched as Tasha's car pulled up, and then shortly after, a police officer approached the front door. Seeing his opportunity to provide crucial information, Ryan walked over. The officer relayed Tasha's explanation that something had exploded on the stove and that everything was fine. Ryan immediately contradicted this narrative. "No," he said, his voice firm with certainty. "There were gunshots. Mutt heard them." Ryan's concern was not just for the general situation, but for the specific individuals he knew lived in that house: Tasha's mother, Judy, and Tasha's 7-year-old daughter. He told the officer there was a little girl in there and a little old lady. The officer, processing this new and alarming information, asked if he was sure. Ryan's reply was unequivocal. Yes, he was really sure. He stressed the urgency, insisting that the officer needed to get inside that house. Bolstered by this critical eyewitness account, the officer's approach shifted from routine welfare check to a potential crisis intervention. He went back to the front door and knocked again, this time with more force and determination. When Tasha opened it, he pushed his way through the doorway. From the officer's new vantage point, and from Ryan's perspective across the street, the tragic reality of the situation became horribly clear. Judy was on the ground in the hallway. This was no longer just a 911 hang-up. This was a scene that demanded medics, backup, and a full-scale investigation. The first responder immediately radioed for paramedics and rushed to check on Judy. As more officers arrived, they performed what is known as a safety sweep of the residence, a methodical search to ensure there were no other threats. It was during this sweep that they formally discovered the person who appeared to be deceased. Their protocol was to check for any other suspects, any other individuals who might need medical assistance or any other form of emergent care. The home, once a place of sanctuary, had become a crime scene. Judy DeLong was born on the 13th of June in the year 1952 in Amarillo, Texas. She did not enter the world alone. She was a twin, her sister named Jody. The two sisters, though bound by birth, were profoundly different in spirit and in the paths they chose to walk. Judy was described as being more reserved, yet she possessed a free spirit, a quiet strength that guided her through life. Her childhood was difficult, a period of her life she did not speak of with fondness, particularly regarding the way she was treated by her mother. However, her love for her sister was a constant, and she spoke of her father with a deep and abiding affection. Whenever she would mention her dad, a big smile would light up her face. Judy was a person of immense warmth and kindness. She was outgoing, friendly, and had a down-to-earth quality that made people feel instantly at ease. She was thoughtful and giving, an amazing person by all accounts. Artistry flowed through her veins. She was a skilled artist and had a particular talent for sewing. Her personality was a beacon of light, loving, nurturing, and deeply caring. Above all, Judy craved the stability and love of a family. Her sister Jody, in contrast, followed a more complicated and untethered path. Jody worked in the sex industry, a life that afforded her the freedom to go where she wanted and do what she wanted, but one that lacked the stability Judy sought. In 1972, at the age of 20, Jody became pregnant. She chose to keep the baby a daughter she named Tasha. However, soon after giving birth, Jody's lifestyle proved incompatible with the demands of motherhood. She found herself unable to provide a suitable environment for her child, and in her time of need, she turned to her steadfast sister Judy. She asked Judy if she would raise Tasha as her own. Judy, ever the stable and consistent force, agreed without hesitation. She was not a wealthy woman, but she understood the profound importance of giving this child a chance at a good life. It meant everything to her. While raising Tasha, Judy found the love of her life, a man named Rolf Hebert. Rolf was also an artist, a creative soul who complemented Judy's own. She was only around 20 years old when they met. Rolf was described as a big teddy bear, friendly, warm, and intelligent. Together, Rolf and Judy made the decision to formally adopt Tasha, and Rolf embraced his role as a father with joy. Their life together was a journey, moving from place to place. They lived in California for a while, and at one point in Post Falls, Idaho. They eventually settled in northern Idaho, where they built a life centered around their shared passions for art and metal work. As Tasha grew into a teenager, she began to display some of the wildness that had characterized her biological mother's life. Despite the challenges, Rolf and Judy remained dedicated, doing their best to provide Tasha with the love, support, and resources she needed to succeed. Tasha was a handful growing up, a child who required constant supervision. She was always taking off with one boyfriend or another, running with a crowd that led her down a difficult path. Her adolescence was marked by lying and running away, embodying all the fears a parent has for a child, making poor choices. Yet, by the time she reached the age of 30, Tasha seemed to have settled down. She became a certified nursing assistant and, in 2004, had a child of her own. She had a daughter with a gentleman named Charles, but that relationship did not last. Years later, she met and married a man named Todd, who became her daughter's stepfather. Judy was overjoyed at Moth, becoming a grandmother, a role she cherished deeply. However, her own life was undergoing a significant change. After decades of marriage, she and Rolf divorced. It was a shock to her. Though people split up for various reasons, it was clear to everyone who knew them that Rolf still loved and cared for Judy immensely. Even after the divorce, Judy would refer to Rolf as her best friend and the love of her life. The separation was incredibly difficult for her. At the age of 55, Judy found herself starting over. She embarked on this new chapter by purchasing a home in the peaceful city of Pasco, Washington. It was there that she met Ryan Rhodes, her neighbor from across the street. They became friends. The day she moved in March of 2007, Ryan remembers Judy as being exceptionally thoughtful and generous with her time and her wisdom. She was the anchor of the neighborhood, a stabilizing and comforting presence for all who lived there. Judy was a master gardener, a woman with an encyclopedic knowledge of plants. She could tell you anything and everything you would ever want to know about growing things. And her yard was a testament to her skill and passion. For several years, Judy lived by herself in her Pasco home. Then, in January of 2011, just 2 months before the tragic 911 call, her daughter Tasha showed up at her door, asking for help. Tasha and her husband Todd had fallen on hard times. With a child to care for and no stable income, they were struggling. They had been doing odd jobs, but their employment was sporadic and short-lived. They couldn't afford to pay for their own place, be it an apartment, a house, or a duplex. Their living situation was unstable, and Judy, ever the protective grandmother, wanted to ensure her granddaughter was safe and cared for. She opened her home to them, inviting them to live with her. Judy couldn't have been happier to be surrounded by family again. She adored her granddaughter and spent her days doting on her. Theirs was the closest granddaughter-grandmother relationship many had ever seen. Judy would take her out into the yard and teach her all of her master gardener's secrets, sharing her knowledge of the little bugs and all the different plants. The understanding was that Tasha and Todd's living arrangement with Judy would be temporary. They planned to get their own place in Pasco, which would still allow Judy to see her granddaughter whenever they were at work. She was looking forward to that future, a future filled with the joy of her family. But that excitement, that hope for a happy and stable future, came to a sudden and violent halt on that March afternoon when officers entered Judy's home and realized that something terrible had happened. Tasha told the officers that she had shot her mom, but she insisted it was an act of self-defense. "She was coming at me with an axe," Tasha claimed. A .357 revolver was found on the floor in the hallway, and next to Judy's body lay the axe that Tasha said her mother had used to attack her. As the initial chaos of the scene began to settle, Tasha would tell detectives a detailed story about the fatal argument with her mother. But as they delved deeper into the evidence, they soon began to question her version of events. It seemed that Judy was holding documents that suggested Tasha was stealing from her, documents that told a very different story. In response to the 911 hang-up call, Pasco police had discovered a scene of profound tragedy. Judy Hebert had been shot in her own home, and her daughter, Tasha Stewart, was claiming self-defense. Medics arrived and attempted to render aid, but it quickly became apparent that Judy had already passed away. As backup units secured the house, officers located Judy's granddaughter. They did not believe the child had witnessed the actual event. She was carefully escorted out of the home shortly after officers arrived. Tasha was placed in the back of a patrol car, not under arrest at that point, but simply to hold her while investigators tried to piece together the situation. Her daughter was transported separately to the police station to speak with a child interview specialist, a professional trained to handle such delicate and traumatic circumstances. Before a full-scale investigation could begin, the police needed to obtain warrants to officially treat the house as a crime scene. While that legal process was underway, they took Tasha to the station for questioning. It was during this time that investigators learned more about the family's recent history. Tasha's husband, Todd, had left the house just 2 days before Judy's death. His departure was abrupt. He had told Tasha that their marriage was essentially over and he had to get out. The environment in the house had become too tumultuous, too fraught with conflict for him to continue living there. According to Tasha, one of the primary sources of this conflict was her mother, Judy. Tasha painted a picture of a stormy and difficult relationship, and she attributed much of the recent tension to new medication Judy had been prescribed. She claimed the pills were making her mother feel and act strangely. She told detectives that Judy was doing the same things to her that had driven Todd away. She mentioned that Todd had also had altercations with Judy, that he was constantly trying to protect Tasha and get Judy to leave her alone. The argument on that fateful morning, according to Tasha, was about money. She claimed that Judy had become convinced that she and Todd were stealing from her. Tasha explained that after she, Todd, and their daughter moved into the house, they had no funds, no jobs, and no income. Judy had given her the debit card to go get something from the store, like food or medicine. However, Tasha admitted that she had used the card on several other occasions, without Judy's knowledge. This unauthorized use of the card, she said, is what led to the explosive argument about money. She told investigators that this was the reason everything had happened. Her mom had called her up that morning, yelling at her because she had found a $3 charge on her debit card. Tasha said that, wanting to avoid another fight, she called her father, Rolf, for advice. He had told her to try to keep calm and stay out of her mother's way. Tasha claimed she was tired and was trying to follow her father's advice, but Judy never gave her the chance to walk away. She described Judy screaming at her, ranting and raving about death. Then she said Judy got up, turned around, and had a black thing in her hand. Tasha's description of the object was vague. It's interesting to note that back at the house, when speaking to the first responding officer, she had used the specific terms hatchet or axe. But in the formal interview with detectives, she referred to it only as this black thing. She described a physical struggle over the object, a chaotic back and forth where she got it, then her mom got it back, and then she regained control of it. At one point during this fight, she claimed she hit her mom in the head with it. Despite this wound, Tasha insisted that Judy wrestled the object away from her and continued her attack. It was at this point, Tasha said, that she ran into the closet in Judy's master bedroom. Inside the closet was a safe, and Tasha said she grabbed a bag out of it. She claimed she knew her mother kept a gun in there. Luckily, she said, the safe had been left open after she had recently asked Judy for her birth certificate. She found a gun in the bag and retrieved it for her own protection. She then shot her mother 3 times, an act she framed as necessary for her own survival. As detectives absorbed Tasha's terrifying and dramatic story, the child specialist was speaking with her 7-year-old daughter. The little girl's account of the day's events painted a starkly different picture. She told the specialist that her mother and her nana had been fighting all day long. She didn't know the reason for the fight, but she knew it had been going on for a while. She shared a particularly chilling detail. At one point, her mother, Tasha, took her into their bedroom, turned up the television to full blast, and told her that she needed to stay in the room. It was after that, she said, that she heard a pop. Initially, if one were to only consider Tasha's story, the claim of self-defense might seem plausible, albeit dramatic. However, after hearing the account from the 7-year-old daughter, the perspective of the investigators shifted dramatically. The detail about the television, a seemingly deliberate act to mask a sound, suggested premeditation. It was at this moment that it became obvious to all involved that this was not a case of self-defense. This was a homicide. Just hours after finding Judy Hebert deceased from a gunshot wound, detectives were deep into their interview with her daughter, Tasha Stewart. Tasha's narrative was consistent. As soon as her mother came after her, she felt she had no choice but to use the firearm to save her own life. The investigators now had the monumental task of piecing together the evidence to either corroborate or refute her story. A walk-through of the residence provided the first major point of contradiction. For a struggle as violent and chaotic as the one Tasha described, one would expect to see signs of a disturbance. Overturned furniture, broken objects, a general state of disarray. But the house was remarkably orderly. There was no evidence of the life or death struggle Tasha had depicted. They were, however, able to confirm one part of her story. The .357 revolver she had used was indeed registered to Judy Hebert. Tasha had fired 3 shots, but only one had struck Judy. The victim's injuries consisted of a gunshot wound to her hand, with the bullet passing through and then entering her chest cavity. Detectives theorized that the powerful handgun was likely the source of the smoke that set off the smoke alarm, the very sound that was audible in the initial 911 call. Such firearms often expel a significant amount of powder and smoke upon discharge. Near Judy's body was the black thing Tasha had described. Investigators found a hatchet sitting approximately 12 to 18 inches from the deceased. Judy was also holding a cordless phone at the time of her death. This prompted the investigators to go back and listen to the 911 call again with fresh ears. At the very beginning of the recording, they could now discern ve kep hat ate. They believed to be the sound of a gunshot. This was followed by some talking, but the words were not clearly intelligible. It sounded something like, "Stop! Give me that help!" Then the phone line went dead. This brief, garbled audio seemed to be a record of Judy's final moments, a desperate plea for help cut short. The investigators then found something else that Tasha had conveniently failed to mention in her detailed account. There was a file folder sitting with the decedent. Upon closer inspection, they saw ve kep hat ate appeared to be blood spatter on the outside of the folder and a clear bullet hole passing through it. This meant that at the moment she was shot, Judy was holding this file folder. The bullet had gone through the folder, through her hand, and then into her chest. This piece of evidence raised a critical and damning question. If Judy was aggressively coming at Tasha with an axe, as Tasha claimed, how could she simultaneously be holding a file folder and a cordless telephone? The physical logistics of such an act seemed impossible. The inconsistencies continued to mount. When the medical examiner looked at Judy's body, they noted the gash on her head, an injury that Tasha claimed to have inflicted with the hatchet during their struggle. The wound was about an inch or two long and went through her scalp to her skull. The most significant observation about this wound was the complete absence of blood. Anyone ve kep ate. Hot basic medical knowledge knows that head wounds bleed profusely. The fact that this one did not meant that Judy's heart was no longer pumping when the injury was inflicted. She was already deceased when she was struck with the hatchet. This discovery dismantled Tasha's self-defense narrative completely. The head wound was not an injury sustained during a fight. It was an injury inflicted post-mortem, likely an attempt to stage the scene to support her false story. This led investigators back to the file folder. Why was she holding it? Where was she coming from? The folder contained bank records and Tasha's birth certificate. When detectives examined Judy's safe, they found similar files. The evidence began to paint a clear picture. Judy was holding documents that proved Tasha was stealing from her. The investigators came to a chilling conclusion. Judy was in the process of making a 911 call to report that Tasha was stealing from her, and she wanted her arrested. That is why she was holding the phone and the evidence. And that, they believed, is why Tasha shot her. She could not allow that message, that report to the police, to get out. The daughter's testimony about Tasha putting her in the bedroom and turning the television volume all the way up now seemed even more sinister. The loud Tuvian would have been more than sufficient to muffle the sound of the firearm, an act Tasha likely thought would prevent her 7-year-old daughter from hearing the event. This detail signaled to the investigators that this was something that was being well coordinated and planned. The likely sequence of events was becoming clear. After Tasha shot her mother, she retrieved the axe, went to ensure her mother was dead, inflicted the head wound to stage the scene, and then placed the hatchet conveniently close to her mom's body. The phone call she received from the 911 dispatcher, the callback after the hang-up, caught her off guard. She had to improvise, and so she made up the story about something burning. Every piece of evidence, from the physical staging of the scene to the testimony of her own child, pointed to one conclusion: this was a homicide, not an accident, and certainly not self-defense. With Tasha's claim of self-defense thoroughly debunked, investigators were now focused on pinning down a definitive motive. Something was in that safe. Something Tasha was so desperate to get her hands on that she wouldn't stop at anything, including murder, to get it. Was this really about a $300 discrepancy on a debit card? It seemed unlikely. The stakes had to be higher. Just a few hours after Tasha Stewart shot her mother, she was formally arrested and charged with murder. The prosecution added an aggravating factor to the charge, elevating it to aggravated murder because a child was present in the home at the time of the crime. This additional element meant that if convicted, she would face an even longer sentence for putting the child in harm's way. There was no question as to who fired the weapon. The central question of the case was why. It was clear from the outset of the investigation that this wasn't a case of self-defense, nor was it an accident. The lingering question that haunted everyone involved was, why would you kill the person who had done nothing but take care of you for your entire life? The evidence pointed towards the safe in the master bedroom. An open safe, a deceased mother, information pouring in that Tasha was taking money from her, the initial 911 call where Judy S.'s desperate shouts could be heard, the granddaughter S. interview, and the forensic evidence that Judy was already deceased when she was struck with the hatchet. All these pieces of the puzzle were swirling around, but the central motive remained elusive. Was it really Dieuete? About $300?